global audience. We're in New York City, where President Trump addresses world leaders at the United Nations. What he's saying about his America First policies and issues important to Catholics. Fighting for the unborn. New details on a U.S. government contract using baby body parts for research. Driving the faithful away. Pope Francis addresses the clergy abuse scandal and why he is concerned about the future of the church. We have a report from the Vatican. And the Last Supper. Before leaving the Baltic states, the Holy Father delivers a gift to a group of nuns. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, September 25th, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. President Trump announces new sanctions against America's enemies and says the U.S. will never apologize for protecting its citizens. He spoke for 35 minutes today at the United Nations General Assembly. His speech raised new questions about our relationship with countries once seen as allies. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reports from outside the UN in New York City. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. President Trump spoke strongly against Iran and Venezuela here on a very rainy day. He also challenged oil-producing OPEC countries, but he did promise a brighter future for North Korea.
I would like to thank Chairman Kim for his courage.
President Trump reports tremendous progress with North Korea, a big change from last year when he called Kim Rocket Man and said he was ruining his country. Now he says they have a good relationship.
We have engaged with North Korea to replace the specter of conflict with a bold and new push for peace.
Still, Trump says the sanctions will stay in place against North Korea until they've scrapped all their nuclear weapons and facilities. He also announced new sanctions against Venezuela, where he says we're witnessing a human tragedy. The president blasted Iran, calling it a corrupt dictatorship.
Iran's leaders sow chaos, death, and destruction.
He says he won't meet with any Iranian leaders until they change their tune.
And we ask all nations to support Iran's people as they struggle to reclaim their religious and righteous destiny.
The president also forceful against countries that steal American technology, like China.
We will not allow our workers to be victimized, our companies to be cheated, and our wealth to be plundered and transferred.
And he demanded that OPEC countries lower their oil prices and pay more for military protection.
We defend many of these nations for nothing, and then they take advantage of us by giving us high oil prices. Not good.
The president says the U.S. is working with countries in Latin America to confront illegal immigration. He wants to uphold borders and stop human trafficking.
The only long-term solution to the migration crisis is to help people build more hopeful futures in their home countries. Make their countries great again.
We've also been tracking U.S. aid to places like northern Iraq. President Trump has asked Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to examine what's working and what's not, because he says we're only going to give foreign aid to those who respect us and our friends. Lauren?
Wyatt, that is a big change in policy. The U.S. is the largest giver of foreign aid. China says it will step in. How could this affect people who are suffering and need help?
Well, the president no longer is basing this on foreign assistance on need alone. Instead, he wants to determine whether countries will, quote, who, quote, receive our dollars and our protection also have our interests at heart. Lauren?
It's a new transactional approach. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reporting from the UN in New York. President Trump blames Democrats for playing con games with his Supreme Court nominee, Brett Kavanaugh. And in a rare TV appearance last night, Judge Kavanaugh continued to deny all allegations of sexual assault. Today, the Senate Judiciary Committee hired an outside counsel who will question Kavanaugh and one of his accusers, Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, on Thursday. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. Republicans are bringing on a female attorney to handle questioning during Thursday's hearing. Her name has not yet been released. Meanwhile, Kavanaugh is defending his integrity and says he will not withdraw his nomination over these allegations. But it's the president going on the offensive, attacking the account of one of Kavanaugh's accusers and blasting Democrats for obstructing Kavanaugh's path to the high court.
It's just resist and obstruct. They're playing a con game.
The president lashes out at Democrats and questions the credibility of Deborah Ramirez, the second woman accusing Judge Kavanaugh of sexual misconduct.
And now a new charge comes up, and she said, well, it might not be him, and there were gaps, and she said she was totally inebriated, and she was all messed up, and she doesn't know it was him, but it might have been him. Oh, gee, let's not make him a Supreme Court judge because of that.
Tuesday night on Fox News, Kavanaugh tried to clear his name, painting this picture of his teenage years.
I went to an all-boys Catholic high school, a Jesuit high school, where I was focused on academics and athletics, going to church every Sunday at Little Flower, working on my service projects and friendship.
He defended his actions when he was young.
And yes, people might have had too many beers on occasion, and people generally in high school, I think all of us have probably done things we look back on in high school and regret or cringe a bit, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about an allegation of sexual assault. I've never sexually assaulted anyone.
On Capitol Hill, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer demanded Majority Leader Mitch McConnell apologize for the Republicans' assertion that Democrats are using the allegations to wage a negative campaign against Kavanaugh.
Let us get the facts. Let us stop smearing women who have the courage to come forward. Let's get to the bottom of this in a correct, appropriate, and dignified way.
So all eyes are on Thursday when both Judge Kavanaugh and Christine Ford, who accuses him of sexual assault in high school, will share their stories on Capitol Hill. Senators may stay in session over the weekend to begin voting on the nomination of Judge Kavanaugh. A final vote could be early next week. Lauren?
White House correspondent Mark Irons. Thank you, Mark. The Department of Health and Human Services scraps a contract with a firm accused of profiting on the sale of aborted baby body parts. Pro-life lawmakers and groups pressured the administration to do just that. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi has reviewed the documents. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. The Health and Human Services Department ends a $16,000 contract for fetal tissue. The Food and Drug Administration awarded it in July to Advanced Bioscience Resources. But back in 2016, the House referred that company to prosecutors for appearing to make a profit in shipping aborted fetal tissue to universities.
David Daleidon's undercover videos in 2015 investigated Planned Parenthood and its business partners, including Advanced Bioscience Resources.
And I literally have had women come in and they'll go in the OR and they're back out in 3 minutes. And I'm going, what's going on? Oh yeah, the fetus was already in the vaginal canal whenever we put her on stirrups. It just fell out.
Advanced Bioscience Resources places its workers inside abortion clinics. They get tissue like brains, eyes, and hearts, and then charge researchers for the baby parts. In 2016, a House special panel investigated infant lives and found Advanced Bioscience Resources appeared to have made a profit when it sold tissue to various universities, referred to the district attorney for Riverside County, California. The House panel's final report says from 2010 to 2015, the company paid more than $1 million to abortion clinics. Yet their income tax forms reveal $6.5 million in revenue from 2010 to 2014.
And you're cutting up and selling the body parts of innocent living human beings who were killed for their body, for their tissue. I mean, there's something that just the human spirit just revolts at that.
Dr. Donna Harrison of the American Association of Pro-Life OBGYNs joined other pro-life leaders urging Health Secretary Alex Azar to stop the contract.
Fetal tissue research is being conducted, but they can't say that fetal tissue research has cured anyone.
Organizations like Planned Parenthood say they're not breaking the law, but are allowed reimbursements for expenses. The Health and Human Services Department says it'll review all its fetal tissue research, and part of that is the National Institutes of Health, which estimates this year it's spending about $100 million on that kind of research. Lauren?
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi. Thank you, Jason. The leader of the Archdiocese of Baltimore says Maryland's Attorney General is probing clergy sexual abuse claims. Archbishop William Lori also says he is giving investigators access to confidential records. In a letter to priests and deacons, he says, quote, "It is my hope and prayer that this independent review and other acts of transparency by the Archdiocese will bring about greater trust in the Church among those who are understandably skeptical about the Church's handling of allegations of abuse." The German Bishops' Conference releases a report leaked earlier this month to media that does say that more than 3,500 people were abused by clergy between 1946 and 2014.
Ganz klar muss gesagt werden, sexueller Missbrauch ist ein Verbrechen.
Cardinal Reinhard Marx says abuse is a crime and those are guilty must be punished. He also apologized for the misconduct and cover-up, saying he was ashamed when he saw the report. More than half of the victims were ages 13 or younger. Pope Francis acknowledges the sex abuse scandals rocking the Church are driving Catholics away.
Li indignano gli scandali sessuali ed economici.
The Holy Father made the admission while speaking to young people in Estonia, one of the world's least religious countries. Francis says he's aware the Church must change its ways. Vatican correspondent Juliette Lindley joins us from Rome. Juliette, on this fourth and final day of his trip to the Baltic states, the Pope tackled the clergy sex abuse scandal head on. And it coincided with a report on sex abuse and cover-up in the German Church. What did he say the Church as a whole needs to do?
Lauren, Francis said he knows many young people feel misunderstood by the Church, and they don't believe that it has anything to offer them. He was addressing Lutheran, Catholic, and Orthodox young people in the Estonian capital, Tallinn, this morning. He added he was very much aware young people are upset by sexual and economic scandals that, quote, don't meet with clear condemnation. The Holy Father said the Church wants to respond to those failings with transparency and truthfulness, saying, quote, we need to be converted. We have to realize that in order to stand by your side, we need to change many situations that have put you off.
The goal of this pilgrimage to 3 former Soviet countries was to encourage the faithful. How successful was the visit?
Lauren, certainly judging from the warm welcome he received in all 3 nations, the trip had a positive impact. The Lithuanians are strongly Catholic, as we know, and his visit to the Marian Shrine, dedicated to the Mother of Mercy in the capital Vilnius, was a highlight for faithful in the country. The theme for that leg of the papal trip was Jesus Christ, our hope. And there was a palpable sense of faith and adoration. Latvians, who are mainly Lutheran, also showed the great enthusiasm to the Holy Father. And today in Estonia, despite the country being largely non-religious, as we know, people showed great respect for the Holy Father. Although 50 years of brutal state-sponsored atheism under Soviet rule left its mark, Pope Francis recalled how the country was once known as Terra Mariana, the land of Mary, and he also chose to warn young people not to let technology jeopardize their personal relations and their cultural roots.
Tomorrow the Pope is back at the Vatican. Will he be addressing any of these issues?
Lauren, tomorrow the Holy Father will hold his usual Wednesday meeting with pilgrims, at which we can expect him to give his appraisal of this trip. Later in the week, he's due to meet the bishops of England and Wales for their visit to Rome. We're also waiting for the Holy Father to meet with Cardinal Donald Wuerl of Washington, D.C. about his resignation that he submitted 2 years ago when he turned 75. The meeting comes after the fallout, Lauren, from the Pennsylvania grand jury report.
Juliette Lindley, EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent, thank you.
Thank you, Lauren.
The chief editor of the Vatican's Asian news service says Catholics in China have mixed emotions about the provisional agreement between the Holy See and Beijing.
We have received some comments from underground and official Catholics. Let us say that they are, on one hand, they are optimistic. On the other hand, people say, but we fear the government because we don't trust it. We don't trust the government because they persecute Christians, they close churches.
Father Bernardo Cevalera tells Vatican correspondent Juliette Lindley there are 20 dioceses without priests and several where younger priests are needed. A Catholic priest in southern Nigeria who was kidnapped earlier this month has died. Father Louis Ojudu was held captive for 1 day. It is unclear if his death was caused by injuries sustained during his abduction. Local media report he was the 5th Catholic priest to have been kidnapped in southern Nigeria this year. Ireland's health minister wants women to have abortions for free. Simon Harris says cost should be no barrier. The Catholic country legalized abortion following a referendum vote last spring. And the United Nations and independent donors rush to help Yemen's hunger crisis. 2.9 million women and children are malnourished in the country. International agencies are required to work from lists compiled by local Houthi authorities. Critics accuse authorities of favoritism. Greece transfers nearly 400 asylum seekers. They were held in an overcrowded migrant camp on the island of Lesbos and are now on the mainland. Charities criticize the conditions of the camp, citing sexual abuse, deplorable sanitation, and increased suicide attempts. The regional governor has threatened to close the facility until the government improves the conditions. And there is a lot more coming up on EWTN News Nightly. We'll head back to the UN to talk to a World Youth Group leader about human dignity.
Sistema crediticio que
3 years ago today, Pope Francis addressed the United Nations General Assembly during his trip to the U.S. It was the 5th time a pope had visited the group. Francis said he joined his predecessors in his prayers and appreciation for the UN. Closely monitoring events this week at the General Assembly is a group inspired by Catholic teaching. World Youth Alliance traces its beginnings to a UN conference nearly 20 years ago. Joining me now from New York City, where he's attending the UN General Assembly, is Lord Leomir Pomerada, president of the World Youth Alliance. Lord, welcome to the program.
Good evening. Thank you for having me today.
Your group's mission is guided by the dignity of the human person. Tell us what that means, how it shapes your work at the UN.
The World Youth Alliance represents over 1 million young people in over 160 countries who are committed to defending the dignity of the person through policy and culture. These groups of young people around the world are committing themselves towards this idea, and at various levels of the society, they create different projects. They lobby with their legislators, their policymakers. They also organize different social media campaigns and educational programs to bring all the ideas that the World Youth Alliance is promoting. The idea of the dignity of the person, the family is the basic unit of the society, and integral development. And our members, wherever they are, from Nigeria, Croatia, Morocco, the Philippines, wherever, they are bringing all this idea and helping young people and even individuals at the policy level around the world understand that it is the dignity of the person that is the basis for human rights, and how we can have these policies enacted at the local level.
Tell me exactly what your human dignity curriculum is. And you share that curriculum with children as young as those in kindergarten.
Yes, that's right. We believe in the World Youth Alliance that we have to bring all these ideas while they're very young. And through the Human Dignity Curriculum program, it's the first program to really have a framework to teach human sexuality within the framework of the whole human person rooted in clear anthropology. So the students are studying persons as subjects and not as objects, human excellence. And our dream and our vision really for the curriculum is for all these young people from kindergarten to grow in excellence, for them to have healthy and excellent decision making, and for them to really have that long-term view and have those goals in their lives. And this has been very evident in the different partner schools that we've had around the world. Children sharing that they're beginning to understand that they're able to learn these ideas and use vocabulary that really helps them to understand more about the anthropology of the human person at a very young age.
What is it about sharing the message of human dignity with young children that really can crystallize its impact? What do you hope the impact will be long term?
Well, there is an urgent need for this types of program, for the curriculum to be brought to students around the world. One of our students shared with us that I'm beginning to understand that it's through my actions that I reveal my character. And so if I'm a good person, it also inspires others to be a good person to me. And so we've been in talks with different governments in Africa, in the Caribbean, and Asia to bring this curriculum at the national and local level, to bring this curriculum not only in schools but even in out-of-school programs. And so we're very excited for that.
Lord Liamer Pomerata, President of World Youth Alliance, get out of the rain, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
There is more to come on tonight's newscast. Up next, a Catholic policy expert will talk to me about China's possible change to its two-child limit, and Pope Francis visits a convent once closed by the Soviets. There are signs China might eliminate its strict 2 children for each family policy. The limit went into effect in 2016 following an easing of the country's notorious one-child policy. Joining me now by Skype from Miami to talk about this potential change in China's birth policy is Dr. Gracie Christie, policy advisor for the Catholic Association. Gracie, welcome back to the program.
Hi, Lauren. Nice to see you.
You too. You've written about this topic. This is very personal for you. Tell us about your youngest daughter's early days in China.
So my youngest daughter is a typical child adopted out of China. She was abandoned at the age of 3 days on a sidewalk, and her life was saved by pure chance, a real miracle that she's alive and that she's here at home with a family that adores her.
Isn't that wonderful? Look how cute she is there. Does this possible change in policy from 1 to 2 to now maybe many, would that end the enforcement of the number of children its citizens can have? And why? Why do it now?
So China has realized after decades of this malignant policy, which caused so much suffering to mothers and fathers, the deaths of so many children, especially girls, and so many girls and boys in orphanages. After all these decades, they've realized that it was a really bad idea because demographically, it doesn't make any sense to have only a few young people supporting millions and millions of people who can no longer work, who are going into retirement age. So now they have the opposite problem, that they need young people to have children, and they're having trouble getting that jump started again.
Well, isn't it also the economy? It's not so much about elevating a culture of life. I think what they're seeing is that this is having real ramifications for how they run their country.
Yeah, no, this is not about being kind to women and men and moms and dads and children. This is really about, it's a simple economic question. How do we keep our workforce supplied with people? And they're finding that it was a really bad idea to eliminate many, many millions of girls just like that in such a cruel manner.
Right. China is predicted to have maybe 30 million more men than women, it looks like, by the end of the decade. Can that damage, do you think, ever really be repaired?
Well, that damage is a huge deal in so many ways, not just missing workers, but when men aren't married, they're single and they're not civilized by their wives. And that has all sorts of other ramifications. So it's a real cultural disaster for China.
The proportion of the population, really, as you were saying earlier, age 60 or older, increased to 17.3% of the total population. This social impact most likely is going to have significant problems for elder care.
Well, all over the world, we still hear a lot about population problems, that the population is exploding. But what's happening is really what's happening in China, that people have stopped having children, not to the extent as in China, where it was such a forced thing. But we have a bigger and bigger growing demographic of people who can no longer work and very few young people who can support them. So I think all societies across the world are going to be experiencing this to some extent in the next few decades.
Dr. Gracie Christie, policy advisor for the Catholic Association. Thanks for joining us. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
And finally tonight, Pope Francis makes a stop at a convent in Estonia once closed by the Soviets. He does not come empty-handed. The Holy Father visited the Brigittine sisters. Their home was founded in 1406. It was closed in the 1940s by the communists and reopened in 1995, 2 years after Pope John Paul II visited the country. Today, Francis had lunch, planted a tree, and brought the representation of the Last Supper, and it was made of wood. That does it for all of us here at EWTN News Nightly. To all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. Good night, and God bless you.